So I will present my work on variation of cognitive load in a cognitive model for deception. So cognitive is one of the major field research in deception. And during the last decade, cognitive processes were more and more resorted in order to improve lie detection or to explain deceptive behavior. For example, Lea appeared to think harder, and it is more difficult to lie when cognitive processes are altered. In addition, neurological study found several cognitive evidence, such as recognition. And in the past year, some researchers intend to staticize it in cognitive model, and Valsig synthesized it in a model called activation decision construction model. So it's based on working memory. It's used process such as recognition, inhibition, phonological loops, and construction components. And in the recent update, it had theory of mind. So in the context of that cognitive model, we use a guilty knowledge test whose is based on recognition and compared to other lie detection method is considered to be more robust, compared, for example, to comparison question tests. So in classical methodology, a deceptive person should have a memory of a relevant item and therefore inhibit the response, whereas an honest person does not. For irrelevant item, neither honest or dishonest people have any memory of the knowledge. So if we look at pupil size, we can assess cognitive process because pupil size is described as an index of cognitive load. So during cognitive events, brain's activity is reflected in pupillar reflex. And so pupil size will vary according to the need of cognitive resource. So, however, despite all the literature on cognitive load and cognitive model on deception, previous study did not intend to follow cognitive load variation during deception process. So this leads us to two hypotheses. The first one is deceptive behavior is more cognitively demanding, and in consequence, pupil size will be more important. The second one is cognitive process, such as recognition, inhibitions, will influence the pupil size variation in deception condition. So, a study involved 42 male participants. They were randomly assigned in two conditions. In the deception condition, they watched a video of a crime scene, and they were asked to answer no to any further question. In the honest condition, they watched a video not related to the crime scene, as they were also asked to answer no to any questions. Our experiments was all computed, automated on the eye tracker device, and subjects just have to respond on the keyboard by pressing a key. So we use a classical guilty knowledge procedure, and all the questions were based on the video crime scene. There are 4 alternatives to answer, and only one of them was relevant. All the others were irrelevant to the crime scene. All alternatives could be presented in the form of a picture of the world. But as you know, pupil dilatation constricts and dilates in response to the change of ambient light. So various alternatives could have a different luminosity, so we need to control them. So otherwise, the difference between relevant and irrelevant item may be due to those differences in luminosity. So before, after any alternative, we introduce a slide to control luminosity. So for example, when you ask the question, where does the crime take place? First, participants view a screen to control luminosity for 3 seconds. And then they use the item correspondent to that luminosity. And so go on to the next, and for every item. So, what did we see in our results? First, we didn't see any results for, for response time in other groups. But if we look at the pupil size, we see a very great difference between honest and deception groups. But we didn't find any difference between relevant or irrelevant items. So we continue our study. And when we look at pupil variation, first things we see is that, I don't know what it is. So relevant items from the deception condition and the honest condition were different. And so it's maybe interesting because some have memory of the item and the other not. And when we look in the deception condition, we find also a difference between relevant and irrelevant items. However, we find only a difference when people start to answer the question. Before, we didn't see anything. So, what did we know? What did we know now? So, we see that we have seen that pupil diameter is more important on the deception condition, and so they need more cognitive resources. But it was not expected that relevant and also irrelevant items need more cognitive load. And if we look at pupil variations, our participants appear to be different in relevant and irrelevant. But we didn't find any difference for recognition process. So we think the difference has to something do with inhibition or constriction or constriction response. Thank you for your attention.